Hello, it's Diane, and I have a couple of fabric and lace covered journals to share with you today. These will both be listed in my Etsy shop. I'm not sure when I'm going to upload this video. If I do it tonight, it's Saturday evening. It's like 20 after 8 right now. So I may upload the video but not list them until tomorrow morning. I don't know. I'll write it in the description below when I'm going to list them. So anyway, I've got a nice collection of laces and lacy fabrics and things like that. And I've been wanting to do these journals, so I finally just made a space for them. I have so many projects to work on, but I made room for doing these because I was looking forward to it so much. So let's do this one first, just because it's the first one I finished. I used cardstock, and this one happens to be pink cardstock. You can see the pink there underneath. And it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I put a 1-inch spine in it. So it ends up being, well, I can't do math on the fly like that. 5 by 8.5. And I took the pink cardstock and covered it with this beautiful sheer piece. It looks like it was a table runner or dresser scarf I would say, but it's sheer. It's got some holes in it here, but the piece that I used didn't have any holes in it, and this beautiful lace edging. So I took the edging piece and so it ended up being all across the top and the front side. And then I just took another piece of lace and added it to this side. I didn't miter the corners. I just added it on. And then this gorgeous piece of almost like a tatting lace came off of a round linen doily. It was a round linen circle, and then this was tatted around the outside, and I took it off and sewed it on here, and I just love that little frilly look there. In addition to the sheer fabric, there's also this piece of pink embroidered sheer that I think it was part of a curtain. And then there's some pink and white lace here that I got at Hobby Lobby, and this somebody sent me. I cut these 2 rosettes off it, and I don't know if it's vintage or not. And this was, I think I purchased these pieces from someone who was selling lots of it on, to de-stash. So I don't know how vintage they are. I do know that this piece is vintage, and this little doily, this is one I found at an antique store. And this one, there's a little piece of that lace from Hobby Lobby again, and there's a nice piece of white lace down here. So it's pretty covered with pretty laces and this gorgeous sheer fabric. And then I have had this picture in my downloads on my computer, and I don't know where I got it. It might have been from Pinterest. I'm pretty sure it wasn't purchased from an Etsy seller. I think I found it on Pinterest. And then I stitched on this beautiful sheer ribbon to tie. On the inside, I just covered it with a pink, very, very pale pink fabric, and then stitched this crochet trim all around the front and the back. And then for the pockets on the front and the back, I used portions of this cotton printed handkerchief. And so that's stitched on the front as a pocket, and there's a little pink safety pin and just a little white tag with some rub-ons and this little charm. And on the back, again, the pocket, and it just has a coffee-dyed index card with a stamp. There's only one signature, but it is packed full. I think there's 11 sheets, so there's 44 pages front and back. This is just a piece of lace stitched on and coffee-dyed muslin along the edge. And this, I used a few sheets of this printable from Ephemera's Vintage Garden, and I do not know the name of the kit. I've had it printed for a while. And again, the muslin wraps around the side. And then these are some vintage, there's a vintage ticket and a vintage bus ticket. And then this is a vintage flower seal from Denizen. Just a little collage there. Here is a 1918 piece of ledger paper that was written on with pencil. So I glued that scrap down, and a journaling card, some lace, and some gathered fabric. There's a stamp up here. This is a card that someone sent me with a pretty illustration on it. And inside I just rubbed some ink along the edges and glued this journaling card down. This is one of Tsunami Rose's, I think it's called Big Ephemera or something like that. But she has a lot of these size cards with different images and lines for journaling. A little 1-inch tuck spot here, and this is the top part of an inventory tag that I coffee dyed, and I put a bulb pin on it and a little tag with a rub-on and a little daisy trim. And it just tucks in there. You can write on the back of that. There's a stamp up there. I got a set of like Gibson Girl era stamped images, and so I use a lot of them in this. There's another one. I found this set on Amazon, and I can't tell you the brand. I can't remember. There's another of the Ephemeris Vintage Garden pages, and there's a tab made with fabric and a little bit of trim. There's some of that pink lace from Hobby Lobby. And there's another couple of the vintage bus or Bridgeport Speedway tickets. I found those from a Etsy seller. Some more of the stamps, and there's some stenciling here. There's a journaling place here and some cheesecloth and fabric and trims. There's another piece of the handkerchief with some trim stitched along the top. A piece of that ledger paper, but it's plain so you can write on it. One of the Tim Holtz people, and a little sticker that someone sent me. This is also stickers from the same set. They were cardstock stickers, very nice ones. And then this is some green printer paper that I had, and I coffee dyed it, and I like the way that turned out. This is a piece of the Tim Holtz ephemera from one of his packs. This is Ephemera's Vintage Garden tag, and I stapled a little piece of coffee dyed muslin to the top. And then this is a merchandise tag from the Tattered Dream Etsy shop, and I put some rub-ons on it, a rusted safety pin that I also got from a Tattered Dream, and a little piece of lace. And I edge punched this paper. This just has a sheet for journaling on, and little collage, fabric collage. Some stamps here and some little flowers on the strings. And this is an image from, and I need to tell you who it is. I've got an envelope with the name on it. Something about Christy Art. I'm sorry. I thought I was all ready for this. And I can't find my envelope. Oh, here it is. Christy Art Designs. So she has a lot of images, and they're very reasonably priced. So I used several different of those sets in these two journals. So there's one of them. And it's pretty. This is a vintage bridge pad, and this is another Tim Holtz guy. The green coffee dyed paper, and I did a collage up here with some fabric and cheesecloth, and this is also Christy Art Designs. I got several of the sets that have the round images because I like using the round images in collages quite often. Now this is a piece of the cardstock stickers that was sent to me, and I didn't know what to do with the piece this big. And it even was a little longer. I had to cut some of it off. But for this journal, I glued it to craft cardstock. Even though it's a sticker, I glue them down because I don't trust the stickers to stick. So I glued it down and then fussy cut around it and then stitched it on as a corner pocket. And I really like the way that looks. And then this is a scrap of coffee dyed paper that you can journal on. It has a lot of cool texture to it. And on this side, there's a piece of the craft paper, the thin paper that I pleated and stitched on. And this is one of the little Tim Holtz ephemera pieces, and I just stitched down the edges. So it's a little, kind of like a belly band. And then there's a little pink vintage tally card, bridge tally card. And that just tucks right in there. Stenciling here. This one has a vintage library pocket on it, and I covered up all the writing on it with scrapbook paper and another of the Christy Art Design circles. This is the bottom half of the inventory tag, and this is a library card, and I just covered up the title of the book. It didn't have any stamping or writing on the card itself, but I covered up the title with this fabric and this vintage doily. And there's another tab with the fabric and trim. Here's a piece of the Tim Holtz ephemera as a tuck spot, and another piece that's just tucked in there. And another of the Tsunami Rose tags. Big Elements, I think that's what it's called. And a pocket with some gold sticker border on it. Some index cards. This has a piece of sheet music across the top, and this has a stamp. Here's a piece of the sheer rosebud fabric with a piece of lace attached to it. That's just part of this collage. There's some velveteen ribbon, and this is a vintage, well, it's from the 1980s time card that someone actually used in pencil, and I erased. Some of it didn't erase very well, but you can write on that. I just like having that faint image there. And I already showed you that. So there's book number 1. This will be the pink fabric and lace journal. And then, did I take this out of there? Yeah, I took these out and didn't show them to you. These belong in the pockets. This is made with Seven Gypsies ledger cardstock and one of the Christy Art Design circles. It just wraps around. And then I put on some of the pink eyelash trim and some of the trim that I sell in my shop. The eyelash trim comes from the Tattered Dream, and the whiter one comes from my shop. And then this, not sure, this might be Ephemera's Vintage Garden, but it's an envelope, and I printed it onto cardstock, so it's a nice sturdy little envelope. And then this is from Christy Art Designs with the film strip along the side, and I stitched it to gridded index card cut to size to fit in here. So those two pieces go in the front pocket. Okay, so now the second one is the yellow fabric and lace journal. So I use yellow cardstock, and then I have this large piece of rosebud, yellow rosebud eyelet fabric that I purchased from that same person who was getting rid of her trims and fabrics and things. And so I got a lot of nice things from her. So that's what this is covered with, and then it's also covered with some gorgeous laces. So this is vintage, this is vintage, this and this and this and this. Most of the fabrics and laces on this are vintage. These two pieces are not. The little rosebuds I don't think are. So, and this wide lace I don't know. Someone gave this to me, or else it came with that lot that I purchased. And there's a piece of coffee dyed, kind of like a Battenberg type of lace down here underneath this. The image on the front is from a 1966 Simplicity pattern. I fussy cut her out, glued her to some ivory cardstock, and then stitched the cardstock down. I just love that image. And then it has this pretty kind of has a shine to it, this gathered lace here, and that's along both edges. This is a vintage doily that I stitched to some yellow fabric and used as a pocket. This is a piece of the pattern tissue from this pattern, so it's 1966 pattern tissue. I glued it down to an inventory tag. You can journal on the back. And this is another lady from the front cover of that pattern, and this is part of the instructions. And they are also attached to some ivory, or kind of a pale yellow cardstock, and distressed along the edges with ink. So that's a nice size journaling tag. And on this page, there's a pattern piece glued down, a little journaling spot, some trim, and gathered fabric. So this, because I used a pattern image on the front, there's a lot of sewing images. I got out my sewing stamps. So there's stitching here and buttons that are stamps. This is a McCall's Pattern card, a little note card that someone had sent me. I had to trim off the edge just a tiny bit to have it fit in here just right. Glued a image down there for stamping. Here's one of my stamps. And some fabric here and some little gathered, some of that little eyelet rosebud fabric is there. It's along the selvage though, where there isn't any of the eyelet embroidery. So rather than throw it away, I stitched it on there. There's a stamp there. This is a page from my Singer sewing book that I got at the Salvation Army a few years ago. Muslin fabric and a little pin paper clip here because it holds this index card closed, and there's a little pin cushion stamped on it. Again, there's a collage with a vintage ticket, a vintage bus ticket, and a vintage Denison flower sticker. Fabric and ribbon tab. There's some daisy trim along the bottom. Vintage tickets, paper clipped on with one of the tiny Tim Holtz paper clips. A dress form stamp. Pattern tissue pleated up here. A journaling card. Tsunami Rose. And then this pocket was made with this little linen square that I've had for a while. I just cut off the appropriate size and zigzag stitched it around. Put some eyelet across the top and another little piece of doily there. And this is an Ephemeris Vintage Garden tag. No, it's Tsunami Rose. This is one of the Christy Art Designs images. And this is just a shipping tag, and I cut a piece of the pattern instruction to size and glued it on. One of the rusty safety pins, one of the trims from my shop, and a piece of lace. Fabric collage here, and a journaling page there. There's a sewing machine stamp and another image from Christy Art Designs. Vintage bridge score sheet. Another collage. Fabric cheesecloth and a digital. This is vintage ledger paper. It's my favorite ledger with the pink and purple and blue lines. And I think this came from Nick the Booksmith. It's either her or, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that came from. I'll put it down below. It might be Innkeeper. Anyway, here's a tag, and this is, I think this came from Ephemeris Vintage Garden, one of her Tsunami Rose. I'm sorry, I keep getting them mixed up. One of her ephemera packs. When I coffee dyed this batch of paper, I also did some shipping tags and laid them on here, so the rusty color from the eyelets showed up on some of the papers. Coffee dyed scrapbook paper there with ledger lines and part of the pattern instruction, just glued to a shipping tag. Another vintage library pocket, and it also has a piece of the pattern instruction and some scrapbook paper, bottom of an inventory tag, and a library card. This was all written on here, so I covered that with a printable library card. Some of the eyelet rosebud fabric is stitched across the top with a vintage doily, and there is lines on the back. There are lines on the back for writing. Daisy trim fabric tab with ribbon on it. Just a journaling place here. I think this came from Tsunami Rose. This is the back of the pattern, and I trimmed off the rough edges and stitched it to coffee dyed paper, so that's good for journaling. And a sewing basket, stamp, This is the back of that card, the little note card, and a little 1-inch tuck spot in the top of an inventory tag again. Some of the rosebud eyelet and some fabric and eyelet trim, time card. And here's the back of the yellow pocket with some lace, some cheesecloth, and another Christy Arts Design circle image. And I took some of the pattern tissue and made a little booklet to journal on. So this is the other image that was on the pattern, and there is the pattern number if you wanted to know it. This is printable. Came with that little dress in there that I showed you. Little piece of fabric. On the back is some more fabric and a piece of the time card. You can journal on that, and then on the inside is just some ledger to journal on. So these books were really fun to make. I hope you like them, and I will make more eventually. And so these will be listed in my shop, and I will put the link below. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.